April 30, 1942, Port Moresby, New Guinea. The coral runway trembles under the roar of 26 Bell P-39 Airacobras as Lieutenant Colonel Boyd Buzz Wagner leads his pilots toward enemy territory. Their orders: strike Japanese airfields and fuel dumps at Lae and Salamaua, the lifelines of Tokyo's advance toward Australia. Climbing over the Owen Stanley Mountains, the Airacobras plunge into a sudden ambush. Dozens of nimble Mitsubishi Zeros slash down from the clouds. The sky becomes a spinning arena of cannon bursts and machine gun tracers. The P-39's 37mm hub-firing cannon tears into enemy formations, while 50 caliber guns rake fuel dumps below. 4 Airacobras are lost and 1 pilot wounded, but every downed American is recovered. US pilots claim 3 confirmed Japanese fighters destroyed and heavy damage to vital supply depots, stalling the enemy's next offensive. This furious clash is more than a single mission. It signals the opening round of a brutal New Guinea campaign. And it shatters the myth that the Peashooter, often dismissed as a second-rate fighter beside the P-51 Mustang or P-38 Lightning, could not survive real combat. From this day forward, the Bell P-39 Airacobra will fight across jungles, islands, and even the Eastern Front, proving that its underestimated design hides a remarkable combat record. Long before that violent morning over New Guinea, the Bell P-39 Airacobra's destiny had been set in a very different world. In 1935, when US Army planners first sketched the requirements for a new single-engine interceptor, they were not thinking about meeting bomber streams 30,000 feet above Europe. America's defense strategy still rested on the belief that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were its strongest shields. The likeliest threat, military leaders believed, was an enemy fleet trying to land troops on US beaches. With that in mind, the Army Air Corps wanted a fighter that could turn sharply, hit hard, and operate at low to medium altitudes, where an invading force would be met, not necessarily one that could climb fast into the thin air where heavy bombers might someday roam. Bell Aircraft, a relatively young company, embraced this brief. Their engineers centered the design on the Allison V 1710 engine, powerful but lacking a turbo supercharger for high-altitude performance. The earliest prototype did carry a turbocharger, but in production, the Army dropped it, believing the weight and complexity were unnecessary. Instead, the team focused on low-altitude maneuverability and concentrated firepower. Short, stubby wings gave the fighter a tight turning circle ideal for ground attack and dogfighting close to the deck, but limited its climb rate and service ceiling. The airframe's sleek mid-fuselage engine layout opened space in the nose for something radical, a 37mm cannon firing through the propeller hub. By the late 1930s, this looked like a winning formula for a coastal defense interceptor. No one foresaw that within a few years, American pilots would be fighting at stratospheric heights over Europe or scrambling to intercept high-flying Japanese bombers over New Guinea. When Japan struck Pearl Harbor in December 1941, America's fighter force was thin. Brand new P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings were still trickling off assembly lines. In contrast, the Bell P-39 Airacobra and its export cousin, the P-400, were already in quantity production. That simple fact pushed the Airacobra straight into the teeth of war, ready or not. 2 days before Pearl Harbor, the 35th Pursuit Group had already sailed toward the Philippines, but their P-39s had not arrived. After the disaster in the islands, the group headquarters diverted to Australia to regroup and re-equip with newly arrived P-400s. The 8th Pursuit, later fighter group, followed, bringing standard P-39s. By March 1942, more than 90 Airacobras and over 100 P-400s were on Australian soil, forming the backbone of the embryonic V Fighter Command alongside P-40 Warhawks. General Douglas MacArthur, fresh from his escape from Corregidor, refused to cede half a continent to Japan. Rather than pull back to Central Australia as early Allied plans allowed, he vowed to hold the line in New Guinea. By April, the 8th Fighter Group had shifted forward to Port Moresby, a narrow coastal enclave under constant threat from Japanese bombers and fighters based at Lae and Salamaua. From this primitive coral strip, the Airacobra's story leapt from blueprint to battle. Its short, high-lift wings and heavy gun package were perfect for the close-quarters jungle war MacArthur envisioned. even if its lack of high-altitude performance meant intercepting Japanese bombers at 22,000 feet was nearly impossible. On April 30, 1942, Lieutenant Colonel Boyd Buzz Wagner led 26 P-39s over the Owen Stanley Mountains on a daring strike against Lae and Salamaua. They strafed airfields and fuel dumps, then fought off an estimated 24 Mitsubishi Zeros. 4 Airacobras were lost, 11 more never reached Port Moresby due to mechanical troubles. Yet the group claimed 3 enemy fighters destroyed and crippled key Japanese supplies. Every American pilot survived, a testament to the aircraft's ruggedness and the skill of its crews. Throughout May and June, 8th Fighter Group squadrons flew daily low-altitude patrols and ground attack sorties. They bombed supply routes, harassed troop concentrations, and intercepted Japanese raids when altitude allowed. In 2 months, they destroyed 12 Japanese aircraft for 9 losses, proving that at the altitudes where most New Guinea fighting actually occurred, the so-called Peashooter could fight on equal terms. By mid-1942, the P-39 Airacobra was firmly woven into the Allied strategy of holding New Guinea and pushing north through the Solomon Chain. Its next proving ground would be Guadalcanal, a name soon to be carved into every pilot's memory. On August 22, 1942, an advance element of the 67th Fighter Squadron landed at Henderson Field with just 5 P-400s. Within a week, the rest of the squadron joined them, flying under the ad hoc command of Marine Aircraft Wing 1, collectively known as the Cactus Air Force. Initial missions aimed to intercept Japanese bombers, but the high-altitude raids quickly exposed the P-400 ceiling limits. After only 4 days of furious combat, barely 3 aircraft were left serviceable. Rather than pull back, the squadron adapted. They shifted to low-level strafing and close support, where their 37mm cannon and heavy machine guns excelled. P-39 and P-400 pilots pounded Japanese troop columns, smashed supply dumps, and shredded barge convoys trying to reinforce enemy beachheads. These aggressive ground attacks blunted repeated attempts to retake Henderson Field. The 347th Fighter Group, formed from 5 scattered South Pacific squadrons, carried the Airacobra's fight across New Caledonia, Fiji, and the Outer Solomons. Operating from rough island strips, its pilots learned to ambush enemy floatplanes, strafe coastal shipping, and provide close cover for amphibious landings. Even as P-38 Lightnings and F-4U Corsairs arrived with better high-altitude performance, the P-39 remained the workhorse of low-level missions. Its short wings and concentrated firepower perfect for dense jungle terrain. Pilots like Captain William Bill Fiedler and Lieutenant Bill Buzz Wagner became legends for bold attacks on Japanese airfields and shipping lanes. Wagner's engineering background gave him an instinct for wringing every knot of speed and maneuver from the Airacobra. Their sorties demonstrated that flown aggressively and within its strength, the P-39 could survive against the vaunted Zero and devastate ground targets. While the P-39 Airacobra earned respect in the Southwest Pacific, its largest and most decisive stage lay thousands of miles away on the Eastern Front. Under the Lend-Lease program, nearly half of all P-39s produced over 4,700 aircraft were shipped to the Soviet Union, where the fighter would achieve a reputation far different from the Peashooter jokes heard in US circles. Soviet air combat in 1942-45 was mostly fought at low to medium altitudes, often below 15,000 feet, precisely the range where the P-39's Allison engine and wing design performed best. Its tricycle landing gear handled the rough forward strips along the Volga and Don. The 37mm cannon and heavy .50 caliber armament proved devastating against German bombers, tanks, and troop trains. This match of environment and design turned the P-39 into a star. Top Soviet aces such as Alexander Pokryshkin and Grigory Rechkalov together scored hundreds of confirmed kills in Airacobras, some ranking among the highest scoring Allied pilots of the war. The Airacobra also saw varied service elsewhere. North Africa and the Mediterranean, units like the 81st Fighter Group and the famed 99th Fighter Squadron, Tuskegee Airmen, trained or fought in P-39s before transitioning to other types. Alaska and the Aleutians, P-39s patrolled the frigid skies during the Japanese occupation of Attu and Kiska, where low-altitude endurance was again more important than high-altitude climb. These deployments proved that the aircraft's perceived weaknesses were context-dependent. Where high-altitude interception was not the primary mission, the P-39 delivered reliable, lethal performance. Despite its successes in New Guinea, Guadalcanal, and on the vast Eastern Front, the Bell P-39 Airacobra never escaped the shadow of its reputation at home. From the moment Britain's Royal Air Force withdrew its Airacobras after disappointing high-altitude trials in 1941, the label Peashooter stuck an insult implying that the aircraft was a lightweight, barely worth flying. Several factors fed the myth. No turbo supercharger meant the P-39 struggled above about 13,000, 15,000 feet, making it ill-suited to the bomber escort missions that defined the air war over Europe. Early encounters in Britain reinforced the view that it was a second-rate interceptor compared to nimble Spitfires or the later P-51 Mustang. American headlines celebrated high-altitude duels over the English Channel and the massive daylight raids from England, not the grueling low-level fights in New Guinea or the Don River Basin, where the P-39 actually excelled. But judged by the mission profile for which it was conceived, low-altitude attack, close air support, and deadly ground strikes, the P-39 was anything but weak. Its 37mm nose cannon and multiple 50 caliber guns could obliterate supply convoys and lightly armored vehicles. Rugged construction and tricycle landing gear allowed operations from primitive forward strips where other fighters simply could not land. In Soviet hands, it became a top-scoring killer of German aircraft, helping blunt the Luftwaffe's power from Stalingrad to Berlin. These facts show that the Airacobra's reputation was less a measure of its true capability than of how air power doctrine changed after 1939. The war shifted toward high-altitude interception and bomber escort missions it had never been designed to perform, while its actual achievements in the roles it was built for were largely overlooked. By the time victory parades rolled through Allied capitals in 1945, the Bell P-39 Airacobra had already slipped quietly into the background. New legends, the P-51 Mustang, the P-47 Thunderbolt, and the twin-engine P-38 Lightning dominated the headlines and the public imagination. Yet the record shows that this so-called Peashooter had done exactly what it was designed to do, and done it with distinction. The P-39 was conceived in the late 1930s to meet the threat planners then foresaw low-altitude defense of American shores against naval invasion. It was never intended to escort heavy bombers at 30,000 feet or chase high-altitude reconnaissance planes across Europe. When the global conflict shifted to long-range strategic bombing and towering intercept missions, its design suddenly looked old-fashioned. But in the Pacific jungles, the Aleutian fog, and the low skies of the Eastern Front, its very limitations became strengths. In New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, P-39 and P-400 squadrons held the line until newer fighters arrived, delivering punishing low-level strikes that blunted Japanese offensives. In the Soviet Union, where most air battles were fought under 15,000 feet, Airacobra pilots such as Alexander Pokrishkin became some of the highest-scoring Allied aces of the entire war. From North Africa to the Aleutians, its heavy nose cannon and rugged construction proved invaluable for close support and interdiction missions. Across these theaters, the P-39 flew tens of thousands of combat sorties, destroyed thousands of enemy aircraft and vehicles, and gave Allied ground forces the air cover they needed to move forward. History often celebrates machines that fit the spotlight of doctrine and publicity. The P-39 was different, a specialist that arrived at the wrong time, unfairly judged by missions it was never meant to fight. Yet its service bought critical time in 1942 and 1943, shielding Australia, sustaining Guadalcanal, and reinforcing the Soviet counteroffensive. Today, restored examples gleam in museums, their streamlined profiles still hinting at the bold engineering of a fighter that dared to put its engine behind the pilot and a cannon through the propeller hub. Every rivet tells a quiet truth. The Airacobra was never a failure. It was a low-altitude predator, a ground attack pioneer, and a combat-proven weapon that helped the Allies win a global war.